Welcome, everyone. Today, we're here to talk about the future of ML with one of the awesome companies who's building it, Weights and Biases. Thanks so much for being here with us today. So I'm Renella from the community team at Replit, and we've got some special guests here with us today. So let's do some quick intros. We've got two awesome guests from Weights and Biases with us. We've got Morgan. Morgan's a growth ML engineer at Weights and Biases and has a background in natural language processing. Previously worked at Facebook on the safety team, where he helped classify and flag potentially high severity content for removal. And then we've also got Lukas with us. Lukas is the CEO and co-founder of Weights and Biases, which is a developer-first ML ops platform. He also co-founded Figure 8, formerly known as Crowdflower, which is a pioneer in the ML data labeling space. And Figure 8 was acquired by Appen in 2019. Lukas has dedicated his career to optimizing ML workflows, teaching ML practitioners, making machine learning more accessible to all, and occasionally tinkering with robots. So awesome to have you both here with us. And then we've also got Amjad, who is our CEO at Replit. Amjad is a Jordanian American entrepreneur and engineer, for those of you who don't know him. He's our founder and CEO. And before Replit, Amjad worked at Facebook, and he oversaw the JavaScript infrastructure team, building some of the world's most popular open source developer tools. And before that, he was a founding engineer at Code Academy. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have all of you here with us today. And thanks, everyone in the chat for participating today. So we're going to get started with a really awesome example of Weights and Biases and Replit together at work. So Morgan is going to start us off with an awesome demo.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ornella. So I'll start first by just giving a bit of context around what Weights and Biases does and the problems it's trying to solve. And so be it if you're a student or a researcher, trying to publish an amazing machine learning paper, get a state-of-the-art result, speak at a famous conference, or if you're on the product side and in industry and you're trying to build apps that do all this amazing work like ChatGPT does. There's a huge amount of work and experimentation that goes into either one of these, and the reality of building anything great is a little messy. And so Weights and Biases tries to address and corral some of that messiness, specifically in terms of tracking how you're experimenting with your ML models, the results you're getting, but also the inputs you're putting in terms of data, the potentially pre-trained models, and any hyperparameter settings that go into your model. And so how do people do this today? Some people are still maybe log into little text files. They have their own, custom solutions, which might be fine for you working alone, on a small weekend project. It's a pretty manageable thing, but gets a little tricky when it comes to working with others, or if you want to go back and revisit these results in 6 months' time. Some people might be using Google Sheets, and again, it has its place and works for smaller single player projects, but again, could be prone to forgetting to log crucial data, or potentially just misentering data, mislabeling data in your sheets. There are of course TensorBoard and solutions like this, where again at the smaller scale for you working on smaller projects, tools like this work pretty well to keep track of your work. But the question is, what happens when A, you want to revisit work after a long period of time, or B, you want to start to share this work and collaborate with others? Maybe it's a classmate beside you. Maybe it's across your small ML team. Maybe it's across a different machine learning team in your research lab or in your company. And you quickly get these issues of people with their own custom login solutions and having trouble sharing their results between each other. We hit the classic example of people sharing their analysis that they've done in Jupyter notebooks, but how do you know which notebook that analysis lived in? Those get shared around, like maybe an email. Maybe you're doing a presentation to a principal investigator or senior management, and so you're going into PowerPoints. But again, where exactly did you leave that PowerPoint when you need to look back for it in 3 months' time? Maybe you're dropping screenshots into Teams, Slack. We're in Discord all these days, right? And so very quickly it gets to be pretty unmanageable in terms of where you shared your analysis with your colleagues and where they can find it later. And so this is one of the things that Weights and Biases sets out to solve, taking these distributed, maybe fragile login solutions and bringing them into one system of record for all of your machine learning workflows. And so I'll give you a quick tour of what a Weights and Biases workspace looks like, and I'll show you how it works, pretty seamlessly with Replit, and especially with Replit's new GPUs. And so this is an example of a Weights and Biases workspace where we've actually logged 100 runs here. We're doing a lot of experimentation, as is the case working in machine learning, trying to find the best results for our model. And you can see some of our metrics for the top metrics that we care about. I'll zoom a little bit there. So on the left-hand side, we have all of our runs here. And I won't go through this, but I want to emphasize, tools like our parallel coordinates plot here, which lets you really see, out of these 100 runs we've done, what are the most important, hyperparameters or knobs that we can tweak in our training pipeline, to get the most out of our model. And you can see some, for example, our learning rate in the center here, are pretty work well in quite a narrow range, whereas others such as this early stopping rounds parameter here are a bit less sensitive to the value you set them. And so this can help you really, squeeze the last bit out of your model, be it in terms of pushing your research to beat the state of the art, or to get the very most out of your model when you're serving it to customers, be it in terms of latency or accuracy or whichever other metric you're interested in. And now Weights and Biases on Replit. And so we have a Replit profile. It's replit.com/@W&B. And there, you'll see a few of our pinned repls. This quick start one is always a fun one to get started. And so here, it's going to do some training. We can ignore this, it's just a small dependency issue. It's going to do some training of a small computer vision model on a popular dataset known as MNIST, which will then push the login results to Weights and Biases here. And so I've logged into Weights and Biases already, and you can see this already starting to kick off and start to add runs to my Weights and Biases project here. And we can go and take a look at some of those runs in this Weights and Biases project. I've logged a bunch of stuff already here. And so we have all of our training and validation metrics that we would like to see. But we also have, we've logged 2 tables here. And so tables is a tool that we have that lets you really get deeper into your data, be it in terms of before you start training, or even understanding, in this case, how your model predictions look. So in this case, we have our predicted number here, which is a 7, and the target, which is also a 7. So again, pretty good guesses here. And so in tables, you can go a little bit further than just inspecting every sample, and you can group by some values here. Now you can see, for example, we've grouped by all of these zeros, and you can see, each of those data, those samples in your data set here. And this can be useful just to purely just understand, to make sure that your data is labeled correctly, that you don't have 6s or 8s, when they should be 0s. And then in terms of evaluating your model, you can also look at the distribution of your predictions. And so this looks pretty good. Most of our predictions for zeros are indeed zeros. So looking pretty strong there. Now we'll keep moving. Another REPL I wanted to show you today was our Nano GPT REPL. And so given all of the hype around LLMs at the moment, and this is a repo that Andrew Karpathy, who used to be the head of AI at Tesla and is a really well-known instructor or professor from Stanford, and before that, this is a library he built. which is essentially, the smallest library he can build to train a language model. And so this GPT model that he's training is, very, very close to GPT-3 and all of the large language models you see in terms of architecture. Those models they have a few training tricks in them, but they're essentially just scaled up versions of what Andrew has trained here today. And so I've actually fine-tuned one of his models here in Replit. We can stop that, and while that's stopping, this is one I've fine-tuned earlier. And so here we can see our metrics for loss and validation loss. But the nice thing here in terms of the context of training language models is that we want to be able to visually inspect our results and understand, okay, the text this model is generating, is it any good? And so the goal of this model, for context, is to be able to generate text that sounds like Shakespeare. And so we train this for 1,000 iterations, and we can look at the outputs, at the start of training, at the end of the training, and see, okay, how is our model doing? And so this is at the start of the training. This is after 50 iterations, and we were given this prompt to be or not to be, classic Shakespeare quote, and hoping it would lead on to something a little bit Shakespeare-like. But at this early stage, 50 iterations in, the text, isn't particularly Shakespeare-like. It says, you need not wait the same time. The truth about our feelings, we often feel of feelings as a commodity, but think of feelings as a relationship. And so because this model is also poor, it's also not the most eloquent text generator, but even the style of that language, it's not Shakespeare. So we can check out, okay, as we got closer to finishing training, we're up at 900 steps now. How is the text here? And if we take this one here, it starts again, to be or not to be. The night looks dark and the day of death is here tonight. Look at him or not. Juliet says, I'll go. Thomas says, Madame. And so you can clearly see there's quite a big difference there as the model has trained another 850 steps. It's clearly sounding a lot more like Shakespeare, although still a little bit incoherent because of the small model size. But that's one other way that tables in Weights and Biases lets you kind of inspect things from the text generation side of things. We can go back here and check this out. And so here is our training or our fine-tuning. And so first I just need to, in this case, we will log this to a private dashboard. And so we should see training kick off shortly. And so in this case, the model has been downloaded, the pre-trained model has been downloaded, and then it gets loaded into Replit. And in the meantime, we can check that indeed we do have a GPU on Replit. And so here you can see we have a Tesla K80. At the moment, it's using 900 megabytes of memory, but that'll quickly fill up to most of the GPU once we start training. And so again, we're going to log to a private dashboard. And so training will shortly kick off. Right now, it's running a validation loop there. While that is running, one more thing to show you in Weights and Biases. And so this is a report from the Hugging Face team, and specifically the diffusers team, who are working on a lot of the amazing stable diffusion examples and pipelines that are going around the internet at the moment. And so they used this Weights and Biases report to share first, internally, but then among the wider community, some training tips on the best way to train Dream Booth. And they gave a great log of all of their experiments, some of the settings they used, the prompt that they gave it, as well as the output images here. So again, just another really nice example, whether or not you're doing NLP or computer vision, or whether you're just more focused on the evaluation side and the prompt generation side of things, Weights and Biases works quite nicely there. And so here you can see, we are fine-tuning a GPT model in Replit. Above here, you'll see this is the initial outputs. Again, it's not particularly Shakespeare-like, but as the model, gets closer to iteration 1,000, we'll have some good Shakespeare being generated Replit. So that's about it for weights and biases on Replit. I mean, I could go all day about what else you can do, but I think everyone wants to get to the meat of this event with Amjad and Lukas. So I'll hand it back to Ornella.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. That's awesome. And we added all of the links if you want to check them out after the show. They're in the chat. Thanks so much. So now we'll bring up Amjad and Lukas for the fireside chat. Thanks so much for being here again. We're going to go through some of the hottest questions in machine learning with both of you, and really curious to hear your perspectives. So we've got some questions already submitted, and then we'll also have some time to answer questions from the audience. So if you have any, throughout this conversation, please put them in the chat, and we'll incorporate them into the chat. So would love to get started with the first question, which is, what is the competitive moat for LLM companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera? Assuming LLM capabilities converge as all of the training data is public, won't it just be a race to the bottom in terms of pricing? Lukas, do you want to start us off with that one?
Well, I'm curious what Amjad thinks here. I mean, I think that question kind of trivializes the effort that goes into training these models. I mean, I don't think it's like an easy undertaking, and I think there's a lot of choices that go into that. And so I think, I mean, just like our companies, I think, GPT certainly has quite a massive awareness that I think would not be trivial for someone to emulate, but they're going to have to keep, making their product better than the competition, just like we do. And from my perspective, I mean, I think moats are kind of generally overrated, and I don't know. I've watched so many products that you think might not have a moat be sticky and successful.
Yeah, I basically believe the same thing. I think that we're still very early. It's actually hard to tell how this space will evolve. I think some of these companies will end up with different trade-offs. You could already see that, like Anthropic is maybe focused a little more on safety and personability, whereas OpenAI is focused more on creativity, maybe accuracy. There's a lot of different ways to kind of slice things, and I think different companies will end up with their own sort of niche. And the way to train these models, like I think now, like the pre-training part maybe is straightforward. There's a lot of data engineering in it, but there's now the reinforcement learning part, which is pretty novel, and everyone's trying to figure it out. So I think overall it's still pretty early to tell how things will shake out. As an open source guy, I hope that there's some version of this that's open source, and I think there will be. I mean, there's already a lot of activity in open source, but at the same time, I think these companies are going to be very profitable and big.
Awesome. Let's move on to something more forward thinking in terms of the use cases. I'm wondering what you both think is the most exciting or impactful proposed use case of LLMs you've heard that hasn't been executed on yet.
I guess from my perspective, there's this temptation to define like LLMs as just this like magical technology that can do, almost anything or like operate, at sort of like a, spectacular level of conversation. And so I think, if that's really like, what you imagine LLMs can do, it's just like incredible the number of use cases. I think one that I'm excited about, myself is teaching humans. I mean, I feel like I consume a lot of educational YouTube content, and I wonder, it does seem like you could get a lot of feedback on the quality of teaching. And even now, I think like for certain topics, I think ChatGPT is incredibly good at explaining them to me, but then there's a lot of kind of deeper topics that I'd love to learn more about and can't really find a great teacher. So I wonder if there's a way to make them teach humans better. That's just something I would enjoy as a consumer. It seems like it would be a great business if you could make it work.
The most exciting thing that I feel like the least progress has been made on is what some people will sometimes called action transformers, or just like transformers or language models that can do things in the world. It doesn't mean that the language model needs to be trained to use these tools, although that would be useful. But sometimes just basic prompt engineering allow you to hook a browser, an interpreter, a calculator, or whatever into a language model. And at this point, I would have expected even ChatGPT to have done some of that. Like, you can easily make it do better math by adding like a Python interpreter into the prompts. So I'd be curious. Maybe there are some failure modes that I'm not thinking about, but I think tool usage. If you think about humans, what made humans special certainly is language and communication, but even more than that is our ability to use tools, and ability to use tools like what we're doing right now in order to communicate as well. And so augmenting language models with tools seems like a important step, but I haven't really seen a lot of progress on it.
Did you see the demo video from Adept AI? It was so compelling. I immediately signed up for the beta, but they have, if anyone from Adept is watching, let me in and know.
Yeah.
It was so compelling. But you always worry with AI applications that, how well does it really work in real world situations? But it was awesome demo.
Yeah, one thing that's clear is that LLMs are amazing at demos. Like, so a lot of the things that we ended up shipping at Replit, we actually demoed in 2020, and so it takes a long time for this technology to mature and make sure it's like production ready.
That's really funny. So to talk about a specific technology, what is your favorite stable diffusion use case or example that you've seen?
There was a Replit Bounty. Replit Bounties is a place to get software made if you don't know how to code yourself or don't have the time to. You can just like post a bounty to the community. And there was this bounty that asked to hook up Stable Diffusion to a T-shirt. So you would go to a website, you would like put in some prompt, it will generate a picture. You would say print it into a T-shirt, and like the next day you get a T-shirt. And so that's like fascinating because it's like such a cyberpunk idea. Like the idea that I can make clothes with like language is pretty amazing.
It's funny. I have like a personal one. This is not a good business, but this is a use case I've been enjoying. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and so she can't read or write, but she really likes to make plans and go back to them. So we'll make like a plan for bedtime or like a plan for the day. And because she can't read or write, she can't like, necessarily like remember them, but she wants like a record. So we'll take like all the things that we're going to do and we'll make little pictures of it and then print them out like in a list, and then we can kind of refer back to them. And so Stable Diffusion is like amazing for that because I couldn't like draw all the crazy things that she wants to do.
Wow, that's actually a profound idea. Like people who can't read or write are able to recall things or memorize things. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because she's so unimpressed by the technology. It seems like obvious that should happen.
That's so funny. We made one of my best friends a birthday card, which was actually a website on Replit, and she's a poet, and we fed some of her poetry and had it create images, and then we made this like collage of them on a website that we hosted.
Share the link. I want to see this. That's so cool.
Will do. Awesome. Yeah, there's some really cool use cases. I'm excited to see what else gets spun up. Do you all see the hype around ChatGPT, LLMs, and text-to-image models diverting funding or resources from other potentially more impactful ML modeling, such as regular scale deep learning, traditional ML, or time series forecasting?
What do you think? I guess I don't. I mean, I feel like hype makes me nervous, but I think that I don't think there's like a single pool of funding. I mean, it might be moving people's attention. Like, I don't know, like maybe grad students, might be moving towards it, but I can't fault them. I mean, it's like new and exciting, and it does seem like it impacts so many things. I can understand that. I do think, I mean, I don't know, from my perspective, I do think there's a little bit of an influx of resumes that we get from people who used to work in crypto that makes me like a little bit nervous, just because I feel like that whole community seems a little bit bonkers to me. I'm not like against crypto. I don't really have like a strong opinion, but I would prefer to work in a hypeless world, but I guess that's not actually possible, sadly.
I think hype serves a certain function. It's a way to accumulate like interest and capital and talent in one place. Sometimes that's like too much. Like I think in the crypto 2021 hype cycle, that was like objectively like bad, just given that how many scams and things like that got up and running. But like the .com bubble, it was like warranted. It was like there's this thing called the internet. Everyone was thinking, rightly so, that is the future. And by the way, a lot of the businesses that failed, that were a joke, eventually became reality, like Webvan, Instacart, things like that. And so I think just like it's like it's just part of human nature, and just need to accept it, and deal with it, potentially wield it to your benefit. But ultimately, like I don't think of these things as zero sum. Like there's actually there's actually more capital in the world, or at least more capital in Silicon Valley, than there are productive uses for that capital. Um, and um, and so hype maybe creates a way to be able to accumulate into one space all that capital to put it to productive use or unproductive use. Um, but it is what it is, and I think any field that uh, feels that they're not getting enough capital should maybe think about their marketing and maybe build something like ChatGPT that goes viral.
Yeah, it's funny. I always tell like younger researchers, like what's worse than hype is like no hype, right? Like I mean, I remember when I graduated and was looking for a job in AI, like basically like all you could do is kind of rank ads or go to Wall Street and try to pick stocks, and like the applications now are so much cooler. And I think the hype, to some extent, it's really justified. I mean, these products are like amazing,
Yeah.
and like I think the use cases are still untapped, and I think it's important to sort of like separate from the hype and enjoy the breakthroughs that we're seeing right now. I mean, I can't even believe, like, that question about like what's the most interesting use case of LLMs. It's like, where do I even begin? Like, it must be such a fun time to be getting into AI with so many applications opening up.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think it's sort of like more ML begets more ML. Like, since we started working Ghostwriter, we started doing other like non-transformer ML to help us with building Ghostwriter itself. And it just come out recently. Someone reverse engineered Copilot, and they found like a small linear regression model on the front end. And so I think these tools will just like compose in a really powerful way. So I think it just brings more attention to the field in general.
Yeah, I think something that's so interesting about this boom that we're having right now too is that open source is keeping pace with the large research universities and Googles of the world. So I'm wondering why you think that is.
I think I know. I mean, I think that there's ML, unlike other software development, has this incredibly strong academic lineage where like open source is the default. And so I just think because like, so much of the ML is coming directly from research, and everybody in research is opening up their stuff. And until recently, like research had no funding to ever buy software for anything, right? So, research is always using all open source. And I think it's a fantastic thing. Like, I think it makes everything, available to, I mean, obviously the compute is expensive, but I think it is, we shouldn't take for granted the fact that, all the best in class tools are available to everyone in the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that this generation of models lend itself really nicely to open source. Um, they're essentially stateless programs, right? So you give them input, you get an output. They're very portable. They can run on any machine. Especially diffusion models are very small, and so that really lends itself nicely to open source. I think it's been hard to replicate the really large models. I mean, some of them are doing well in benchmarks, but then when you try to use them, they're actually not very good. And I think that
Which
there's like
models are you talking about, Amjad? Do you want to name name names?
all of them, like
Really?
yeah, like JLM, Bloom, all of those. Like, I mean, I respect everything they've done, but they're really not that great. Um, and maybe they're still iterating on them, but like I think maybe here is like what we talked about earlier, which is like the data advantage starts to show at the very large kind of number of parameters. That being said, like I'm pretty sure they'll catch up pretty soon.
Yeah, I also think there's a lot to make a model. I mean, but like between like a model that like runs well on a benchmark versus does something actually useful for a real human, that's not like a trivial undertaking.
Yeah, and in some ways, like benchmarks can actually be hurtful.
Although, it's funny, I agree, but I remember before there were benchmarks, like one thing worse than like benchmark focus is no benchmark focus. It's just
Yeah,
absolute, like
just pure
insanity.
fluff marketing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it used to be an ML. Like a lot of times people didn't even feel like they needed to, like in the 2000s, like it was like people would sometimes have ML that was worse than a baseline of just guessing the most common possible answer, and you could like publish a paper like that. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh wow, oh, that's definitely awful.
But yeah, I think maybe we've over rotated to benchmark obsession.
Yeah.
So speaking of open source, I was wondering if Amjad could walk us through the approach to leveraging open source to build tools like Ghostwriter.
Yeah, for sure. Ghostwriter, when we started working on it, it wasn't really clear that there was going to be this like big open source movement that's going to help companies, startups like ours, build Copilot like experiences. And one of the main reasons we wanted to self-host it and not just like rely on an API is because we really want to control the latency and really want to control the quality, want to be able to improve it over time, want to be able to collect data and feedback and iterate on it. And we felt like for some use cases, very large models or chat type use cases, it's fine to use sort of an API. But for something like this close to the user, where every keystroke we are presenting you with information, it was very important for us to own the experience end to end. So I think at first it was just like a bunch of let's try everything out there. So we literally tried every model out there. And then we found Cogent from Salesforce. When you're evaluating some technologies, they're never perfect for your use case, but you see a glimpse of like, okay, I can see this working. And then it was like 2 weeks of like manic work, trying to make it faster. So we had like a big breakthrough like an order to magnitude improvement in speed. And by the way, I think that got upstreamed as well. So now code gen's pretty fast for everyone.
What was
And
the
then what's that?
What was the breakthrough?
I think it was a faster transformer and another optimization. I forgot which one, but both of them I think are now upstream. So so the standard thing is pretty fast. I think when we first found it, it was like 30 seconds per request.
Ooh, that's
Which
super.
was like, yeah. Um, and and then and then there was a few other optimizations, for example, like streaming, and caching and other ways kind of to run it more like efficiently, and it started feeling like something we could use. Eventually we also did some fine tuning and figure out how to improve the model on the fly based on user feedback. Now we're training our model from scratch, but that's after we shipped, right? We shipped the product, people love it, and we're collecting a lot more data. We know what's missing. We know what features we want, and so we actually have our first model that we trained from scratch. We're using it internally. It needs a little bit more work, but we'll likely have something to announce over the next month or two.
Really excited for that. What do you think have been the challenges of fine-tuning and deploying LLMs for low latency while also keeping them performant?
I mean, there's always this trade-off between parameter size and latency, and it feels like pretty linear. I don't know, Lucas agrees with that, but so just the bigger, the smarter. It's almost like IQ. That's like pretty straightforward. So the one we deployed today is 2.7 billion parameters, and surprisingly, it's really the sweet spot, like where less than 2B is actually like pretty dumb. And more than like 3 billion, it becomes kind of slow, visibly slow. So we found the sort of the Goldilocks of language models, 2.7 billion parameters. In terms of fine tuning, it doesn't really have any bearing on latency. The tricky thing there is, like, again, what we talked about with benchmarking is that you could do well on benchmark and then go try it in the real world, and it's actually made the model performance worse. We had one case, for example, where it was doing better on Python after some fine tuning, but then it forgot how to write JSX, which is JavaScript's like React syntax. And so we call testing by vibes. So in addition to the benchmark, after
This
we
doesn't sound like best practice, Amjad.
that's one stage. That's not the whole thing. We kind of check the vibes of the model, and then if it passes the vibe check, it goes into an A/B test. And so an A/B test, we check the acceptance rate. So typically our acceptance rate, I think, hovers around 25% of all suggestions. And if it inches upwards, then we're doing something well. If it's neutral, then maybe whatever we did wasn't useful. And if it goes down, that's definitely bad. And so that's sort of the last test. We'd love to get more objective about it, but we haven't found a way other than like just building up more and more benchmark over time.
The vibe driven development. Strong at Replit. This is a question for the both of you. How do you maintain a rapid pace of shipping ML powered products or MVPs with the field moving so fast? And how do you keep up with customer needs and all of that?
Amjad, I admire Replit. I'm curious for your your answer to this one. I don't think we have a silver bullet.
A lot of people, when they ask this question, they expect some kind of process. It's probably the other way around. It's probably less process to ship faster. So just like hire great people and trust them to do great work. and be okay with some mistakes. Because if you're gonna have a higher throughput, you're also gonna have higher rate of mistakes. So being able to correct from mistakes is gonna be super important. Um, and then like I think it really matters that what you're building is fun, because I think if it's fun and exciting, people want to do more things and release more things. Mm, and finally, like we just encourage it via memes and traditions. Like we call it shipping season, is like one season where we start shipping a lot of stuff, and um, we have T-shirts and all of that stuff. But at the same time, you want to balance it with some important like behind the scenes work, like performance work. Um, and sometimes we like try to dress up performance work and sort of unglamorous work with some glamour in order to kind of feel the same way about it. Um, but if you're able to do both, I think you'll be unstoppable.
Yeah, I think I guess from our perspective at Weights and Bias, I think some of the things that I've learned is keeping a direct connection between the people building the product and the people using the product is like like making sure there's like tons of touch points. Like we invite all of our customers into our Slack channel just so it's really easy to have that conversation. And um, we try to really encourage the engineers to like engage with our customers, because I think we're not quite as we don't have quite the gigantic community of Replit, but we do have tons and tons of users that we all admire and love and want to make happy. And so I think like not I think there's a temptation to sort of put process and product people like in between the users and the engineers to like avoid interruption. And there's like a logic to that, but I think there's nothing like an engineer that like ships a feature actually going out and like telling the world, hey, like I shipped this. And so we really try to keep that kind of connection with everyone in the company and our customers. And then I think there's another thing that I've really learned, which is like fighting technical debt is like so important for maintaining good velocity. Like, so it feels slower at the time, right, to like keep upgrading your stack and like keep changing the internal developer tools. But I think it's just like so important to to making sure that you're not slowing down over time.
Awesome. So something that we shipped recently at Replit is bounties, and people are curious about how bounties fits in the overall vision for Replit. And when you think about all of the advances that are, coming out for developing software, are we going to get to a point where using GPT-4 to code apps with a prompt replaces bounties?
I think bounties will be sufficiently AI powered in the short term, like even probably before GPT-4 comes out. But our view at Replit from the start, I actually wrote this blog post in 2017 about how our view of AI computing in general is it augments people, does not really replace them. I don't like really believe in this view that AI will replace people. I think there's some like low level work that will probably get replaced, and that's generally been not good for humanity, even if it comes at sort of um, problems in the short term, and you'd want to have a way of dealing with these problems. Those are difficult discussions, but nonetheless, I think long term technology just makes humans more productive, gives them more control over their time, and allows us to do more creative work. Um, I think this generation of AI is no different. It is ultimately a tool, and I think part of its marketing has been that it is like an AGI or something like that. I don't think it's anywhere near there. I'm not sure what it takes to get there, but I still view it as a tool. LLMs are ultimately, in my opinion, completion engines. So you need human input or creativity in order for the LLM to do something interesting. Um, so with bounties, I think we supercharge both the buyer and the provider with AI. So we want to help the buyer specify their problems, using AI. I want to help the programmer, maybe give them sort of a leg up, or give them part of the solution using AI.
Sorry about that. My internet dropped. Not good AI happening at Xfinity today. There's a question in the audience about asking if jobs will be created with the role of like chat GPT expert or like AI user expert who can utilize AI tools efficiently. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. What do you all think?
I guess the question is like is there a job to use the AI well? And it certainly does seem like that. I think someone was talking about, prompt engineers does sort of seem like that. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, how like asking a question well does seem like a critical task to using the GPT models well. And it's a really interesting skill. I mean, it totally seems like the trends are in that direction. And I've been talking to a lot of our customers that are kind of like thinking about this and noticing. I mean, I don't know if you saw there's a really hilarious result, right, where if you ask the GPT a question and then you say show your reasoning step by step after the question, it gets a lot more accurate, which is just like absolutely fascinating, probably good advice to humans as well. But I think that stuff is really, really interesting. I don't think I think it would be, to pontificate now about where this goes. You'll probably be wrong, but I agree that it does seem like there's a new kind of job being created that currently is called prompt engineer.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're trying to do something with LLMs that require context over time, prompt engineering becomes incredibly important. The context size of these models is fairly small right now. It's about 2,000 tokens, which is maybe like 4 megabytes, which is like of text, which is like similar to like programming an Atari or something. Like it's fairly early days and requires, similar to like programming early video games, you had to do a lot of trickery to figure out how to fit things into memory. And so I think prompt engineering is pretty low level sort of thing right now, and you need to be, I see a lot of amazing engineering that goes into that. For example, like there's this trick I learned about recently where let's say you have a large corpus of things that the LLM is supposed to be answering questions about, and you can't put the entire thing into context. So what you do is you take the embeddings, which is the internal representation of a text of the question, and then you have an index of all the embeddings of the corpus or the data that you have, and then you match those embeddings in order to figure out which context to include into the prompt. It has like pretty amazing sort of algorithm, and yeah, I think it's going to be a specialty. Even if they solve the context length issue, you're still gonna have to be economical about it, because you don't want to be slugging this data back and forth between the server and the client. And so, in addition to sort of having these prompt tricks that Lukas talked about, there's also just like low-level engineering of like how much context to introduce for the LLM to read.
Do you all have any thoughts about increased scrutiny from lawmakers on AI? So the US banned chip exports to China, and the EU is considering legislation on the use of ML models if they're biased or harmful in some way. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
That's a complicated question. I think it's probably good that people are thinking about this. Like, I do think that the impact of these models is quite big, right? So, like, and I think people don't really appreciate how, if you put like a vision model in a car that steers it, you've created a lethal weapon, right? And so I think it's and I think that this idea that only people in ML are allowed to think about the ethics in ML seems very bad to me, right? Like, I think like it's good for there to be like a full conversation of everybody affected by ML, which is everybody on the planet. I do worry about the specifics of the legislation that we see. I mean, I just don't really, it's painful for me. I think as like a practitioner in the field, some of the things that come out of it, and some of the lawsuits to me seem misguided or unfair. But it's a really broad topic. I guess I would say overall, I think that everyone should be paying attention to this. I think it's probably good that governments are paying attention to this, but I'm sure that a lot of what they do is going to be frustrating for technologists like me.
Yeah, I mean, there are more examples in technology of misguided legislation than like something that's helpful. For example, like the cookie thing. Like, I don't think anyone thinks it's really helpful, including consumers. And there are like better ways to handle it. I think the EU just has a history of kind of creating surface level solutions. Uh, so, I mean, my hope is like maybe like legislators could use AI to regulate AI. Like, can you have a conversation with ChatGPT about ChatGPT? That could be interesting. Can we raise the sort of level of understanding of these technologies of politicians and legislators using AI? That's something worth working on if you're looking for something to work on. I think that's a pretty great idea.
So, speaking of things to work on, there's a question from the audience if you all have any products or ideas you're hoping to see built or explored in our upcoming hackathon.
Yeah, I would really love more exploration of the idea of action models. And again, you can just fine tune a GPT-3 to do that, or you can just have a very elaborate prompt. But can you have a model that can control like the Replit IDE, or can use weights and biases to train its own model, whatever? Like, can it do like interesting things, right? So in the world using tools, I think that would be my prompt. It's like, make LMs use tools. I think there's so many ways to approach this. I think it's probably the next sort of order of magnitude jump in usefulness is probably around this idea of tools.
I'll say one thing that I think is really coming that I think I would be exploring if I had more time is chat interfaces to everything. It's kind of like what you're saying, like, but instead of like arbitrary tools, I think making chat interfaces to your own tools. I think they've been enraging for my whole lifetime, and so you think like a chat interface is garbage, but I actually think we might be at the point where I wonder if like the best way to use any tool in the next few years could just be like, just telling it in natural language what you want it to do. I even wonder with weights and biases, it's like, make me a report that, tells me about this. It seems like we're maybe at the point where that could be actually valuable.
We'll talk a little bit more about the hackathon in just a minute here, but wanted to close out by asking what products coming out of Replit and weights and biases in 2023, and what can you share about them, and what are you excited about?
Actually, speaking of chat interfaces, we are releasing Ghostwriter Chat, and it's basically what Lucas just said, which is you can control the entire development experience end to end by just talking to the model. So I'd say that's pretty.
Hey, I'm so excited to see that. When
Yeah.
is it? When is it coming out? I want to see that.
Like probably like early February. Hello.
I think we lost Lucas to the
Okay.
internet AI gods. There he is.
Sorry, they booted me off the Wi-Fi just as that's my question. Sorry.
It wouldn't be a Replit live stream without something amiss. Lucas, did you have an answer that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of stuff coming. I think a lot of it is around making stuff reliable in production. So, kind of ways to monitor if your model, once it's being used, is working well. We think that's a really underserved use case we're excited about helping with.
That sounds useful.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you both so much for your time. This was extremely exciting to hear about. We're going to go ahead and share how folks can apply what they've learned or some tidbits they've gotten from this conversation in our upcoming Replit and Weights and Biases Hackathon. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But
Cool. So I wanted to share just quickly, I think some folks may have already seen it, but we are having a joint hackathon coming up starting on February 4th. And I wanted to share the information for how to apply for the hackathon. So I'll paste the link in the chat to the application website. But basically, you'll register on this website and then you'll receive an email with all of the details. Something really, really awesome and special about this hackathon is that Weights and Biases will be paying for GPUs for the participants. So you'll have access to amazing power for your machine learning models on Replit. And I just wanted to go over the prizes really quickly. So we've got a grand prize of 300,000 cycles, which is incredible. And this is going to go to the best project of all of the projects from the hackathon. And then we've got specific awards for both best Weights and Biases report as well as best Replit project. So if you're not familiar with Weights and Biases reports, it's this really cool way of documenting a model and all that you've done with it. We'll share some resources about that as well. And then we've also got one for best REPL that's shared to the community. And then the last prize will be honorable mention. So we're really excited for everyone to participate in this hackathon and looking forward to seeing you all on the wait list. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you February 4th at our hackathon kickoff.